What I'm going to do today is show you 5 tragic examples of how a poker career can go very wrong. These are not examples of real people, because it wouldn't be fair to put students and people I know through poker in the public eye like that and expose them for failing to achieve their goals. But these are basically parodies of real life examples that come from people that I've met, people that I've tried to coach, and unfortunately not been able to turn into winning players. What goes wrong? Let's explore that today and see if you can avoid the same pitfalls, but let's do it in a really fun and entertaining way. Look at this ridiculous image. Look at it. I didn't draw this. An AI drew it in about 8 seconds. And it was given a prompt, like human overexerts himself and fails. Or human bashing head against wall. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the AI these days basically scours the internet and forms an image that fits your description with a few thematic parameters applied. This is so fun. I've been doing this so much. So for every poker career failure we discuss in today's video, I'm going to illustrate it with one of these AI generated images. So the first one I want to talk about is the mass grinder. So this is a player who isn't really that experienced. Maybe they've done a bit of theory, like maybe they've worked their way through some of my courses or they've digested other content. In some cases, they've actually been digesting content for a very, very long time, but to no avail. But their approach when they're playing poker is really different. They have this obsession that they have to put in loads and loads of volume, and they might 3-table Zoom or 8-table regular tables, depending on the site and whether that's allowed, and stuff like that. And they may play for 4 hours at a time with no break, and they might play for 12 hours a day. Or maybe a bit less extreme than that, but in any case, this is insane. And what their game actually looks like when they do this is that it's a complete shambles. They are not able to reduce their volume to the point where they can really focus on what they're doing or integrate theory or study with play. They don't give themselves enough time at the tables because they're playing for huge amounts of time, but also only spending 4 seconds on each decision, or maybe just auto-clicking. Another problem is that desires really infiltrate the in-game framework of thinking for these players. They get so lost in the ebb and flow of money coming in and going out, good variance and bad variance in other words, that they lose sight of the fact that they don't really have any control over that, and what they actually can control is their level of performance, how much they think, and how much theory they actually get into their game, while simultaneously avoiding bad thought processes. The mass grinder doesn't do this because they're too obsessed with just clicking buttons and getting loads of volume in and grinding poker like they're grinding some computer game that you can just log like hundreds of hours to complete. Gamers actually suffer from this very reliably. I had a student recently who isn't the main student I actually have in mind. I do actually have a student or maybe 2 or 3 students over the years in mind for each of these leagues. The problem with this other guy, not the main sort of subject of this video, was that he'd been a gamer like his whole life. He's quite young, like 24, and he just played games like really competitively and seriously for, 8-9 years, and he's just super used to just sitting there clicking, and it's all reaction, it's all muscle memory. A lot of it's like how quickly can you like aim the gun and shoot if you're playing an FPS. How quickly can you drag things and drop them if you're playing a real-time strategy game in RTS or whatever. So yeah, gamers suffer from this a lot. This just like absorption into the trance of grinding mass volume. That's how I would describe it. And that absorption into that inner world is devastating because it creates an environment that makes it literally impossible to think, and accountability drops off a cliff. Accountability is the idea that the more aware and self-monitoring you are while you're playing, the higher your level of performance will be. Some people have accountability off the table. So they're like, I'm going to play 40k this week and I want you to take 300 cheeseburgers of my resources if I don't do it, or something like that. But then they go and play that volume and they're clicking like a zombie and they have no accountability to the level of performance. Here's the thing, guys. The human concentration span has been scientifically proven to drop off harshly between about 50 and 90 minutes of doing a fairly strenuous activity, or any activity really that requires focus. Now, in poker, that's a lot of focus that's required. So the mass grinder is literally sitting there putting in 300,000 hands of garbage, shitty volume. Terrible, terrible level of performance. Accountability is dropping simultaneously with level of play. So as level of play deteriorates, so too does the ability to monitor that level. And what that creates is a complete ignorance to all of the problems that that player has encountered. They don't even know how badly they're playing, but upon looking at their sample in one coaching session, I can dig into a few hands and say, this is diabolical, my friend. What are you doing? Why have you put in 250,000 diabolical hands? Why are you losing at 5-L when if you just monitored your play, sat in, sat out, did a bit of review, talked to some other humans, played maybe 10k hands instead, you'd probably have won because you can beat that game if you play your best. Don't be a mass grinder. It's a rakeback trap at the micro stakes. You're not proving anything to yourself by cramming millions of hands at 10-L. You should play like 10,000 hands of 10-L and get the hell out of there, regardless of your results. If you do that properly, even if you run bad in that stretch, it doesn't matter. You're probably ready to play a higher stake. Don't sit and grind mass volume at the micro stakes. It's absolutely absurd, especially when you're doing it in this brain dead way. I love this image. This AI is so talented. What a beautiful piece of art to illustrate the perils of the mass grinder. Do not be this guy. Or at least, if you're going to be that guy, don't have a brain in your shoulder/chest. Is that a muscle? Is that a brain? Is he reading a newspaper with barcodes on it? The AI's understanding in a dingy basement? You could write a fucking movie script off of this one picture. This AI is a god, but also quite stupid. Okay, next one. Guys, there are two problems that afflict poker players these days, and it's highly likely that you watching this are succumbing to one of them, and that it's stopping you from realizing your poker potential. The first problem is diving too deep into GTO, studying solvers too deeply too soon, trying to copy their outputs, and maybe just neglecting the reality of what your opponent's range actually is. So many people have lost the ability to hand read these days. That's a huge problem. On the other hand, you have this problem of not enough detail. Coaches, training sites, coaching for profit schemes giving you literally what they call a playbook, a list of commandments. What people who do that are really motivated to do most is to just get you winning quickly by training you almost like an animal, like a chimpanzee or a parrot. And that doesn't make you a poker player. So Cash Injection is a course that's 10 episodes long that shows you some really killer exploits that are going to work everywhere, micro stakes, low stakes, live. Sometimes people are like, Pete, where does your course work? What stake does it stop working at? And it doesn't really work like that. It just works against most humans. This is mass data driven. We've taken a bunch of information from millions of hands. We've looked at patterns. And I've also coupled that with my own just experience in the game and cognitive understanding as to how people play. I'm going to show you a clip now from Cash Injection. I hope you like it. I hope it whets your appetite. But I do want to let you know that I'm ashamed of this clip. I'm actually not proud of it at all. And that's because my beard in this clip is absolutely atrocious. I don't know what I was thinking. Please forgive me. What has happened to the EV of that choice? Let's locate our hand. Let's turn on the EV view. And we can see that it is now plus 7.77 chips. This is on its way to being a whole big blind, about 3 or 4 tenths of a big blind better than before. This might not sound like a big deal, but over the long run, if you think about it, we express win rates in BB per 100. We're always measuring big blind swings per 100 hands. This is happening in one hand. I have no idea what I was thinking with that facial hair. Anyway, if you like the way this course sounds, it's carrotcorner.com to pick up Cash Injection today and learn some skills, tips and tricks that are going to help you crush the competition quickly, but with full knowledge of what you're doing and why you're doing it. That's the ethos of this course. Of course, the copycat zombie. I really feel bad for this player because they've gone through poker learning from people who don't know how to teach poker. And this is really common. It's like bad parenting. It's like when you're raised by awful parents, your chances in life are severely impacted negatively. It's not that you can't succeed, but when you grow up in, like, let's say a horribly toxic home environment or something of that nature, and I have some of this experience in my own childhood, which I don't know if I've told you guys about that before, but there was a bit of instability, when I was growing up, and it definitely made it a lot harder for me to orientate myself in adult life and find the optimal way to progress at times in many different ways. And in poker, when you are raised by wolves in the jungle, do wolves live in the jungle? I don't think they do. In the tundra, and then you come into the poker cities and try to survive, like you have no adaptability. You've been raised by people that say things like board coverage and pot control. God help you. This is kind of an epidemic because there's a lot of shit content out there. And there's a lot of shit content out there because poker is really hard to get good at because it's an extremely new subject compared to physics or history of art. Poker's not been around for very long, and thus the caliber of the education and the rigor of that education is extremely low almost everywhere. That's why I do what I do. I'm motivated to fix that. Yeah, maybe I don't want to disappoint my dad, who is an academic. I don't want to be a degenerate gambler, so I have to make poker academic. Maybe that's part of it, but it's also because I want you guys to be able to learn properly. And when you learn poker by chatting to a friend that isn't that good at poker, and that's your mentor for 3 months, or you hire a coach that's actually quite shit, or you are on YouTube digesting random vlogs of live players. No offense, Brad Owen, no offense, Rampage. No offense to any of you people. I'm not calling anyone out specifically. Oh wait, I just kind of did. But the point would be that that content is aimed at the masses. It's aimed at, here's an entertaining hand. Let's talk about some very light and flimsy strategic notions, and let's not really get into theory at all or get into the true objective form of the game. And that content is not there to make you a good poker thinker. That's not generally the point of it. It's there to be very entertaining and watchable, and those guys do a fantastic job of that, and many other guys like them. But that's not a poker course like you'll find on carrotcorner.com or in some other places. This is a real problem because people indoctrinate in their poker vocabulary and their cognitive framework all of these concepts that aren't just bad or wrong, but they're actually logically inconceivable or unworkable with a really good framework. For example, let's say that you work with someone who says they never bluff and just goes on about this all the time and says, why did you call here when they never bluff? Pool doesn't bluff here. Humans don't bluff here. They don't bluff. People are just pussies. They're just scared to invest money. You have this sort of coach or something, or this sort of like peer or friend. And it's like, well, that's actually really false in most spots. And that idea is not just false, but it's actually so poisonous. It's so venomous that it's going to get into your game and it's going to cause your game to break down in the same way that like poison causes the human body to break down. Because you're in some spot now in which you have the goal of evaluating whether you should call a river bet, and instead of doing that evaluation objectively, you're just saying they never bluff and you're folding in 100% of river spots when maybe 35% of them are really over bluffed by humans, even at 10NL. What you have to do is look out for these copycat zombie behaviors that are too general, or ones that pertain to concepts that have nothing to do with EV. Follow me on Twitter as Characters1 on there a while back. I went through 30 things. I've actually only done 14. I'm going to get back to it. I went through a list of the 30 days of bad poker thought processes that you should avoid, and there's loads of them on there that have nothing to do with EV. So for example, when someone says, I'm going to check my hand for pot control, it doesn't actually mean anything. All they really want to express there is that they feel comfortable with a smaller pot, probably. Now, if the hand is a polarization error to bet, meaning it's too mediocre to bet, it can't value bet and it can't bluff, then it's not that you're going to check for pot control, it's that you actually have to check, because check is much better than betting, because betting just loses extra money the times when money goes in. But to say that's about pot control is really bizarre when you could say the pot control argument for so many hands. I mean, pot control means nothing. Board coverage is basically a really weird solver alien term that only matters if your opponent can see what suits you use pre-flop. I'm going to use clubs here sometimes for board coverage of club boards. This is utter garbage. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Not only that, but you can also copycat a solver. So let's move on to point 3 now, which is a bit like, this is the human zombification of the poker player. I want to talk a little bit more about perhaps the robotic zombification of the poker player now. Man, the AI has absolutely nailed this one. I said make a nerdy clown, because that's kind of how I see this unfortunate specimen, the GTO beginner. Man, this is a problem, yeah? What we should start with is a philosophical argument about GTO. A structured argument. So premise 1. Well, let's start with a really basic premise 0, actually. The purpose of poker is to make as much money as possible. That may not be fully true, but it's certainly one of the main goals, is to make as much as possible and succeed and win instead of lose. I think everyone would accept that our goal is usually to win and not lose. I think we can start with that. Premise 2, the way to win and not lose, to the maximum degree, is to take the line that has the highest EV in as many spots as you can. I think that one's pretty watertight as well. Premise 3, the way to get good at taking the highest EV line in every spot is to play your hand optimally given your opponent's range and the strategic situation in front of you. The problem is that with GTO, it doesn't actually do that. What GTO is an output. It's a final landing place after an algorithmic journey between two exposed strategies that are fully exposed to one another. So what a solver is doing is it's fighting itself ad infinitum in a spot. It's like, yeah, I'm going to fight you this way. Oh, you threw a punch here. I need to dodge this way now. oh, you tried the uppercut. I don't know much about boxing. That's probably kind of evident in the way I'm talking. But this is what it's doing until it reaches a Nash equilibrium where both fighters are just like this. They're locked. Because if either moves, they'll make a mistake. That's the equilibrium of poker. What that means is that in so many spots in game theory, the solver is concocting a strategy partly to maximize EV against the way the GTO bot is playing. That's its opponent, i.e. itself. And from that part of things, we can derive some useful principles. And I built the Carrot Poker School fully on a huge, saga of a journey through solver study. But I know what to get out of it. I'm very experienced that way. I know exactly how to interpret what the solver is doing, and I understand why it's doing what it's doing nowadays. And that's why I made the Carrot Poker School, the theoretical course on carrotcorner.com. But if you aren't at that level and you start seeing these outputs, you might assume things are important that aren't. A lot of the stuff in the solver is this meta battle. It's like, I have to use this hand as a bluff. Not because there's anything good about it for a human to use against a human opponent, but because it stops my solver opponent from bluff catching more with certain combos and gaining EV by being able to select their blocker effects properly in this really micro level. For example, let's take a really basic example. Let's say that you have the choice between bluffing the river with either a club or a diamond in your hand, and there are no clubs or diamonds out on the flop. The solver will make sure that you can't choose between clubs and diamonds when you're bluff catching and gain any EV. It will go out of its way to do that. It'll make sure its frequencies with clubs are exactly the same as its frequencies with diamonds when it's bluffing, so that you can't be like, oh, clubs are better than diamonds to bluff catch with. Now, in some other spots where it's a little bit more relevant to the decisions we would think about, we might just be dealing with something like the solver is bluffing busted straight draws in the river sometimes, but then not all the time, and then it's bluffing loads of under pairs as well. And the reason it has to do both of those things is to stop the other solver from generating winning calls solely with certain blockers and being able to clearly fold other hands. It wants to create mass indifference. It wants to put the opponent in this spot where they really can't gain any EV by either calling or folding. That should not be your goal. Your goal is not to make your opponent indifferent like that. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. Paranoid madness. Your goal is to figure out what your opponent, who's a deficient flesh-built human being, not a robot, what is their deficiency? What are they getting wrong? How is their range different to theory if you know theory? If you don't know any theory, then just what do you think their range is and how should you beat it? I will say it's hard to do that when you don't know any theory, but it's possible. So studying theory is not the same thing as studying GTO. Studying theory is about learning how the cohesive web of poker concepts fits together and how do you use that to understand what people should do. And then how can you infer from there how humans don't do that, how they actually deviate accidentally, and how do you punish that? Hand reading is a lost art, and this clown is a lost clown. And the reason he feels alone in this big city is partly because it looks like an absolute hell, like an anti-utopia of flashing lights and buildings that are melting into lasers. That's how the AI sees the world. It's an absolute psychopath. But he's also sad because he's taken the wrong path, and everyone around him is calling him a GTO chat pro nerd. And he's coming on my stream and being like, well, I think you'll find that the frequency. That's another thing. The frequency. Who fucking cares about frequencies? Honestly, what a stupid concept. Okay, frequencies matter in certain situations where you're playing a really transparent spot over and over again against the same opponent and you don't want to hand them an exploit on a silver platter. You don't want to spoon feed them an exploit to kill you. But usually these things don't exist. Like, who cares on the turn whether your frequency for bluffing an overcard and flush blocker is 70% or 80%. Maybe you should just figure out whether it's good or not to do it, because you're not indifferent. You're not indifferent. A solver might be indifferent because it sets up its life to cause indifference, but you're not indifferent because your opponent's bad. Don't be this guy. Please, please, please don't be this guy. I say this all the time on my channel, but I'm going to say it again. Don't be this guy. Let's move on. This one is no joke. And I've taught lots of people like this, and this is actually a very serious life problem. These people, the gambling addicts, almost hide from their gambling addiction by virtue of the fact that it's in poker, which is primarily a game of skill over the long term if you try to win, and you do everything at the table that makes you likely to win. The problem is that for the gambling addict, their play is very often just based on desire. They're incapable of folding even when it's clearly a very bad investment, and if they were actually in the right frame of mind where they were trying to win, they would avoid that play. But because they're not trying to win, not through their choices, okay, maybe they're trying to win emotionally, they desire winning, but that is not the same thing as setting your sights on winning, like laser focus, and living your poker life to achieve that goal. That is not the same thing. I don't know what the hell this AI game is here. I mean, of course it's being played in the melty laser city of Doom, which is a very bad place to be. We've already seen the characters who inhabit the city. And man, what a film you could make out of this, guys. Yeah, what a movie you could make. Look at these two. Like, the one on the right is kind of like clown face, and who knows, there was no mention of clowns in this one. But of course he has to have like makeup like some kind of WWE wrestler from the 90s. And then the girl just is like wearing a mask because like COVID exists in this place. Like it's not even like just a melting hell pot of doom. There's also COVID, as if it wasn't already hellish enough. So yeah, this is a sad place to be. And I've taught many students like this who put in hundreds of thousands of hands across months or years, and they lose a lot of money. And part of their addiction as well is actually investing in tuition, getting coaching. And sometimes I have to say to these people sooner or later, look, I think you've got a gambling problem and I'm not happy teaching you. And a gambling problem is a spectrum. It's not just like you either got it or you don't. It's not like COVID in that sense, like these people are obviously suffering from. It's more like there are scales of gambling problems. So I have a gambling problem to some extent in that when I lose a big pot, I have certain cravings that I didn't lose that pot and I want the money back. To some extent, that's a gambling problem. But if it's quite short-lived and I don't act on it, I don't start making terrible life choices over a period of months or years because of it, then it's not a severe problem. But if you're actually sabotaging your life, like you could be doing other things, but you're like hooked on poker, and because you're hooked on poker, you feel like you have to win because that justifies the vice, that's not okay. It is not okay to sit there and lose 20k in a year because you're trying to become a winning poker player cognitively, but emotionally you're trying to punt all your money off. If you're at the table and you're losing heavily in a soft game and you feel extreme anger and desperation and you make bad life choices and your mental health plummets because of this, then you're not a grinder, my friend. You're a gambling addict that's hiding under the guise of trying to make money at poker. This is a huge problem. Ethically, it's your duty, it's my duty ethically to call these people out and say, you have a gambling problem and you're not going to win at poker because your desires completely run the show and not in any way your logic. And the best thing for 90% of these people to do, and I'm sorry to say this if you're sitting there thinking, is this me, is to not play this game. Because you have a brain that responds, it's too impulsive for this game, and the reward centers in your brain, the dopamine reward circuits in your brain, are set up in a way that makes it quite untenable, in my opinion, for you to succeed. So this is a big one, and you need to really zoom out, take a break from poker and ask yourself, is this me? This is a common way people fail, but these people usually shouldn't have chosen poker in the first place. They have a certain pathology here towards gambling that needs work, or needs avoidance as well. Okay, next, the chicken. The chicken is so screwed because their risk aversion that they've inherited through their genetics is stopping them from being a good poker player, because here's another logical philosophical argument if you care to partake. Premise 1, to be a good poker player, you very often have to take actions that will lead to frequent loss of money. To be good, you have to do that. Premise 2, if many people are chickens and they are more risk adverse than others and they're wired very strongly against being willing to do that, or at least being able to do that without significant emotional or mental cost, sort of destabilization effects here. And finally, therefore, those people will not be good poker players and it'll be really, really hard for them to make it, and their journeys will be tragic and will end in the same way that many chickens' journeys end. God knows what the hell is going on here. I can't tell if that is the ass of a chicken on the left or it just doesn't have a head. Knowing the AI in this world that it's generated, I'm going to go with doesn't have a head. It's just like a monstrosity, an abomination, but not abnormal at all, because almost everything in this world is an abomination. Look at that chicken on the right. Look at its eye. Its eye is basically just its face, and it's got an upside down head. That one in the middle is almost perfect. It just doesn't have a left foot, but that's a minor ailment in this laser melting world of hell. But yeah, this is another hell that awaits you in poker, because if you are the chicken and you never triple the river and you never check raise the flop and you fold all the time because they never bluff, and your red line jumps off a cliff and dives into the ocean and hits off a rock and dies, then you won't win. You will not win. And maybe you can't win. Maybe there's no way back from this. This is a video about hell and doom. Maybe if you're a chicken, the pathologies you have, the wirings of your brain are too strong and forceful for you to break free from them. And maybe you're destined to this fate. I wonder what the writing says on the walls of this Doom world. Yeah, the chicken is kind of screwed. I mean, let's wrap up. Let me summarize things in a bit of a more positive light now, because this has been a bit heavy and hard to take, so maybe I can get some enthusiasm back into you guys. I hope I haven't scared the shit out of you, but I hope this has made an impact, and it's made you consider whether you are one of these people, and whether you should continue playing this game. Maybe you can. Let's talk about that now. Let's go full screen. Let's get these horrible images off of our screen. We thank the AI for its efforts, but it needs therapy. But don't we all need therapy? I mean, what we've seen today is 5 of the most tragic extreme cases. And the leaks that we actually looked at today, the good news for you guys is that if they resonated with you, if you identified with some of those leaks, that doesn't mean you're necessarily doomed, like the really extreme examples and the creatures depicted in the pictures today. Actually, you may only have these leaks to a certain extent. So it's not like when you have something a bit wrong with you, that means you're untreatable and you're damned. It's not like there's just you're fine or you're completely screwed. We talked about this in a binary way by going between people that don't have these sort of problems and then people who have them to the fullest extent possible, really. And of course, the people on that far end of the spectrum that suffer from these ailments in poker extremely are going to have 0 chance of success, because that's the extreme end of the spectrum. And very, very few of them are going to come back from that. But if you only have this like 20%, if you're 20% a chicken and 8% a degenerate gambler and 4% a GTO nerd, it's okay. Like, that's not too much. You can get those down to near 0. And maybe you'll never be 0 in any of these things. Maybe you're always going to score something in these areas, because we all have positive and negative traits in poker and in life. And in poker, our negative traits don't need to be so strong that they ruin our career or they cause tragedy, but they might. So maybe you could give yourself a score between 0 and 100 for each of these 5 things. Go back, watch the video, look at the images again, have nightmares, it'll be fun. Let me know what you think about it. I'm going to drop the link to the picture creating tool I used in the description, because it's fucking fun just to play about with. It may cause lunacy though, but doesn't poker anyway. And if you want more from me, then I'm Pete Clark. CarrotCorner.com is my site. Carrot Corner Poker Education is the YouTube channel, and Carrot Corner is the Twitch channel. And I'm Carrot1 on Twitter. Do go ahead and drop us a sub, a follow on those various platforms. And for all of the paid content, Cash Injection, Carrot Poker School, etc., check out CarrotCorner.com. Let us know what you thought about this video. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you guys very soon for another foray into poker. This wonderful game, and hopefully not another foray into that melting laser world. Let's just try and sleep tonight, and sleep well. I hope I haven't given you nightmares. Bye for now, guys. Take it easy.